Okay. During the 9 days, we are meant to increase in our Bais Bezalel, our love for each other, in order to bring about the coming of Mashiach, which the cause of the exile was because of a lack of Bais Bezalel, senseless hatred. And so the way to bring about the coming of Mashiach is through avas chinam, loving people even when there seems to be no reason to love them. And the Rebbe said that we're so close to coming to Mashiach. In the language of today's Torah portion, there's 42 journeys from Egypt to Israel. So we're now at the end of the 42nd journey. We're already by the Jordan, by Yericho, by Jericho, and therefore we're able to already taste of the love and the kindness of the coming Mashiach. In that spirit, I want to share with you tonight an incredible story. It's a story that was printed in the previous Rebbe's memoirs. Just as an aside, the previous Rebbe's memoirs are amazing in the sense that just by reading the memoirs of the previous Rebbe, it just changes the way you look at life. It's just it caused such a paradigm shift. So I hope that hearing tonight's story will inspire anyone who's watching to read it themselves and not be satisfied with my poor rendition. The previous Rebbe gave his memoirs to someone named, last name is Meckler, I think Chaim Meckler, to write these books of his memoirs. And so there is a bit of poetic license that he used to portray the memoirs of the previous Rebbe with the previous Rebbe's permission. And this story I'm going to share tonight is very in sync with the theme of these days about love and kindness, extending to everyone, even animals. But more interestingly to me in this story is not just the love and kindness, but the transformation of the hero of the story, Rabbi Shaul. The Alter Rebbe's father, his name was Reb Baruch, and one of the people in his life that inspired him to go in the path of the Baal Shem Tov and become a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov was a man named Yitzchak Shaul. Yitzchak Shaul, he was a son of a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov. His name was Reb Nissen, in the city of Arki. And Yitzchak Shaul was a son-in-law of a blacksmith named Rabbi Reuven. Rabbi Reuven had 3 sons-in-law, and Yitzchak Shaul was the youngest of the sons-in-law of this blacksmith. And the previous Rebbe describes first his life as a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov and how he behaved, and then goes back to describe how he had this transformation as a young child. So Yitzchak Shaul lived in the city of Rabbi Moshe, and the Rabbi Moshe, unfortunately at that time, it was very common for people to disrespect those who were ignorant in Torah. It was so common that it was taken for granted that this is the way things should be done. So in the city of the Ramisl, most people at the time were ignorant of Torah. They were religious, but ignorant of Torah. And those select few who were scholars, they were like an upper class, much like the divide between the lords and the serfs. The serfs were the majority of people, but they served the lords. Anyway, so before the Renaissance that chassidus and Baal Shem Tov brought to the world, it was really a major divide. So Reb Yitzchak Shaul, he chose this profession of being a blacksmith, and this was to the chagrin of his father-in-law, Rabbi Reuven. Rabbi Reuven, he liked the fact that his older sons-in-law chose to spend their time studying Torah, and he was hoping that Yitzchak Shaul would also study Torah, but Yitzchak Shaul didn't want to. He felt that he'd be able to influence people more by being like one of them in the working class. And his father-in-law, Eliezer Reuven, he hoped that maybe his wife, Dvorah, and his daughter would agree that Yitzchak Shaul should get involved in Torah study, but they didn't see eye to eye with him at all. In fact, they said to him, listen, you yourself prove how it's possible to be an honest person, a good person, whether even you're not a Torah scholar. So in this town of Dabar Misl, Eliezer Reuven was able to notice a marked difference between Yitzchak Shaul and other people. And this is something he paid attention to because because his wife and his daughter-in-law, his daughter, they were happy with him staying with him in the business, Yitzchak Shaul being in the business with his father-in-law, and so he tried to see who his son-in-law was and to analyze his behavior and compare him to other people, and he discovered something amazing about his son-in-law. While other people walk around with the title scholar, they're a Talmud Chacham, his son-in-law had this unique humility, and he paid attention to a relationship that his son-in-law had built with a man whose name was Zvulun ben Yamin. Zvulun ben Yamin was an expert veterinarian, and he also skinned animals for a living. In his town that he had lived before moving to Dabar Misl, he was always scorned by everyone. He was scorned because of his lack of knowledge of Torah. And he was so ignorant, he said that before he got married, he didn't know an aleph from a base, he didn't know how to read it all. And in this town that he lived in, everyone made fun of him. Everyone made fun of him because of his lack of knowledge of Torah. And he only would go to and have an aliyah once a year on Simchas Torah. And which aliyah would he get? He would get aliyah with all the children. All the children thought this was hilarious. This adult is having an aliyah to the Torah with them. And everyone made fun of him. They made fun of him so much that he felt he couldn't stand their torment. And he actually moved out of town to Dabar Misl because of all of the ridicule that he received. But Dabar Misl wasn't much better. Dabar Misl he was also scorned. And the only person, he wasn't just scorned in the synagogue, he was also scorned in the bathhouse. When you come to the bathhouse, everyone would say, oh, here's this ignorant person. They will laugh to his face at him, his children will laugh at him, and adults would laugh at him. That was considered acceptable. That was considered normal. The only one who was befriended him at all was Yitzchak Shaul. And Yitzchak Shaul, who was a Torah scholar, him showing this friendship to Zvulun ben Yamin caused him to give him it really lifted him up. And it really caused him to cry with emotion. This great fortune that he had, Yitzchak Shaul was befriending him and being nice to him, and he opened up to him. And Yitzchak Shaul said, please, I want you to share with me, I want you to talk to me. And he treated him like an equal, which was such an anomaly, so unusual at that time. And he told Yitzchak Shaul the problems that he had. He said, number one, I have a daughter daughter Dina, who's almost 18 years old, and I would really want to have a Torah scholar as a son-in-law. But people laugh at me when I say this. Like, well, how can I possibly get a son-in-law? And number two, my children are getting older. I want them to all learn Torah. I didn't have a chance to study Torah. My wife, her father was a shoemaker, and she didn't learn any Torah either. And her father, in his old age, he retired and became a shamish and a shul. She also doesn't know anything. But I want my children to learn. So Yitzchak Shaul said, I'll teach them. If they have the ability to learn, and I could teach them until they're ready to go into a school, I'll be happy to learn with them. And Zvulun ben Yamin was so excited. He's eyes full of tears. Says, you've saved me from despair. I'll never forget you as long as I live. And so Yitzchak Shaul said, regarding your daughter, my father, Abnissen, Naharki, he does make an effort to pair up people. He's a matchmaker. I'll write to him. So Zvulun ben Yamin said, oh, great. So I will, I want you to tell your father that I have quite a respectable living and I could support my son-in-law. You won't have to worry about anything. So, but tell him the truth. Tell him how ignorant we are. Tell him what I do for a living, how I skin the animals. And and I don't how I my teeth chatter when I have to get an aliyah at the Torah. But listen, he says to Yitzchak Shaul, but at least he says, I never remember saying anything that wasn't true. I always try to say the truth. And I told my children to be kind to animals and to be kind to people. And that's what he told Yitzchak Shaul. Yitzchak Shaul assured him he's going to write to his father and he's going to make an effort to find a match for his daughter, for Zvul Binyamin's daughter Dina. The next morning, Zvul Binyamin comes to the synagogue with a bag of money. He tells him, I learned once that you're not allowed to trust an ignorant person. So I want you to know that this is real. He gives him the sack of money. And he says to him, I want you to hold on to this. And I want you to have this so that my daughter could have a dowry. And you can know the dowry is there. You could find someone that may consider that me to be our family, to be someone that they would be interested in marrying. Yitzchak Shaul was really touched by the emiskite, by the truth and the simplicity and the humility of Zvul Binyamin. And Zvul Binyamin was really touched by the friendship of Yitzchak Shaul. He was in the seventh heaven. And one day, Zvul Binyamin asked Yitzchak Shaul, how come when I'm among the Gentiles, when I heal their animals, no one makes fun of me. No one, they respect me. How come the Jews have this thing? They have to know so much Torah. They have to know so many things. And everyone makes fun of them for not knowing. Why do Jews have to know more? So Yitzchak Shaul explained to him, listen, God offered the Torah to all nations of the world. No one wanted it. The Jews accepted the Torah. And we're meant to be an example for the rest of the world. No one's allowed to make fun of you. They took out a Gemara and explained to Zvul Binyamin that when there are 9 Torah scholars together, they're still not able to have a minyan. A minyan is made of 10 Jews. And the 10th Jew may be an ignorant person, but only with the 10th person can there be a minyan. They took out a Gemara Chulin, that's at Bais Bezalel, where there Reish Lakish says, the Jewish people are compared to a grapevine, and the grapes are the scholars, and the leaves of the grapevine are the ignorant people. And therefore, the scholars have to pray for the welfare of the ignorant people, because it's ignorant Amaratzim, those who are ignorant in Torah, who protect the grapes, protect the Torah scholars. And he explained to Zvul Binyamin how, because of God's gift, Jews are different, and Jews have to cherish this gift. And that's why there are some Jews who all they do is study Torah, because we have this great, unique gift. And he told Zvul Binyamin, you can study Torah too. You go to the synagogue between Mincha and Ma'ariv, and they give a class in the Agadic section of the Talmud, the section of the Talmud which has stories, and you will be familiar, you will understand it. You can understand the Torah. And Zvul Binyamin couldn't believe it. Really? I can understand it? He says, yes, you can go. You may not be familiar with all terminology at first. You could ask me anything you want. I'll be happy to explain it to you. But you'll get familiar with it just by attending every day. I promise you will understand Torah. What this really, really, touched Zvul Binyamin, and what melted his heart even more was a letter that came from Nissen to Yitzchak Shaul. The letter, he said, I have a few people that maybe a match for his daughter Dina, and I haven't yet decided which one, and just let him know that. And of course, Zvul Binyamin is so touched by this, but then his father added something which he did not share with Zvul Binyamin. So I want you to know that Zvul Binyamin is fertile soil for the seeds that you will plant in him. In other words, he's a special neshama. I'm not sure if Yitzchak Shaul's father was a chassid Baal Shem Tov, had divine inspiration or not. The previous Rebbe doesn't mention it in the story, but it's clear from the way his son paid attention to his father's words that this was significant. This person is special. The seeds you plant in him will bear fruit. So shortly after this, there was a pandemic, which through the events of this pandemic caused everyone in the town of Rabbi Moshe to have new respect for Zvul Binyamin. What happened was that there was a pandemic that affected the animals, and young children were dying, getting sick. And this was because of contaminated milk in the goats and the cows that was a result of the animals eating poisonous grass. And the hero of the hour was Zvul Binyamin. As a veterinarian, he knew what the problem was, and he knew how to solve it. He knew what herbs and grass the animals needed to eat to heal themselves from the poisonous grass, and he worked day and night, saving lives, and he was like an angel of God, protecting the whole community from this pandemic. So the whole community recognized Zul Binyamin as being this hero. And the day before Rosh Chodesh Elul, the rabbi, the community gets everyone together in the synagogue, and he tells them that, God chose someone to save our community. We all must endeavor to be worthy of God's choice to be the person that can cause benefit to others, and began to cry. He said that a rabbi is a leader of community, and there's a fault in community that's put on the rabbi's shoulders as a leader of the community. He's meant to teach the community. So he tells his community, we can learn so much from the fact that God chose him to be the one to help us. I think what the previous Rebbe meant is that it was a result of them scorning him and stuff, that God ordained that he should be the one to help them, because the issue apparently that was causing the pandemic, this is all my conjecture, was because of the fact that they scorned him and they didn't have respect for each other in the way that they needed to. And that's why Hashem caused the salvation to come through Zul Binyamin. That's conjecture. Anyways, moving along. So when Zul Binyamin, after the Rabbi was doing well, he went to work in other nearby towns who also were affected by this pandemic. And he came back one Friday afternoon, and he senses in the mikvah, in the merchatz, in the bathhouse, he hears people talking about him. And they're all talking about how great he is, and what a wonderful guy this guy is, what a nice thing he's doing, what an amazing thing he's doing, saving everyone's life. And he comes out of the bathhouse, and he meets Eliezer Ruvain and Yitzchak Shaul, Eliezer Ruvain, the father-in-law, the owner of the blacksmith, and his son Yitzchak Shaul was working with him in this midri, and he's in tears. He's in tears because he learned that if someone gets honor in this world, they lose a share in the world to come. Is maybe I should move out of town. People give me respect like this. I don't know what to do. And they were like incredulous. Like here, they're trying to get this person to have some self-respect for himself. And now when he's finally, getting some respect from the town, he is in tears. So, and they had a good discussion about herbs, and Eliezer Ruvain and he, as they walked to shul together, they spoke about the wonder of creation, how there are certain poisonous grasses and herbs that can cause animals to get sick, and as Zul Binyamin said, and it's a miraculous power that God put in the earth, that there are other things that can, even if the animal eat the poisonous grass, it can be healed by adding something else. And he said, but why do people attribute any power to me? It doesn't do with me. It's just the power of Hashem, and if I happen to know it, anyone else can know it too. And it has nothing to do with me. It's something which is only because of God's kindness and because of God's wondrous way of taking care of the world. And then Zul Binyamin and Eliezer Ruvain arrive in the synagogue. Eliezer Ruvain had this custom every day that whenever he would have a guest in his home, whenever he would not have a guest in his home, he would put aside a penny to give to charity. And when he had a baby, he put aside another coin for his baby as well. So besides the regular funds he would give to charity, he added funds whenever there was no guest in his home. He wanted every meal they should have a guest. He didn't have a guest, he would give tzedakah instead of the money given to pay for the meal of his guest. And so as he had several children, started adding to a substantial sum. So when he arrived in shul, he had the money, but he didn't want anyone to see him give this money to charity. And the charity box was in a prominent place in the synagogue, and he had to come into shul with Zul Binyamin. So he was trying to shake Zul Binyamin off of him, so he could secretly put this money that he had wrapped in this little cloth to put into before Shabbos, to put into the charity box. Anyways, when Zul Binyamin and Eliezer Ruvain arrived in the synagogue, they noticed that the 11-year-old son of the caretaker of the synagogue was taking care of was doing the chores of his father. What happened was that his father had broken his leg, and so he had to do everything himself. So Eliezer Ruvain and Zul Binyamin started cleaning up the shul, and they started putting the water, lighting the candelabra, in preparation for the Friday night for Shabbos, so that everything should be ready when davening began. So as they're in the shul, the rabbi of the synagogue walks over to Zul Binyamin, and at the end of the prayers he says, "Good Shabbos, Reb Zul Binyamin." That title he gave him, Reb Zul Binyamin, without, the previous Rebbe says, without telephone and telegraph, without newspapers, it spread like wildfire in the whole town. The rabbi called Zul Binyamin Reb Zul Binyamin. Everyone was like blown away, and that really gave him a new respect by everyone in town, beyond what the appreciation they had for him saving their lives into the pandemic. The rabbi calling him Reb Zul Binyamin was like headline news in Deborah Miss. Yitzchak Shaul, he wasn't only working in the smithery with his father-in-law as all other workers. Because of his knowledge of Torah, he actually was able to invent something that brought a lot of money into his smithery. He learned in the Mishnah about a certain tool that's attached to a plow that causes the earth to get cut up. And so all of the farms around didn't have this tool, and he knew there must be some kind of tool like this. He learned about it in the Mishnah, and this really changed everything in financially for his father-in-law. But I want to now go to, and besides helping his father-in-law financially, he also spent time teaching. Every Shabbos, he would teach his wife the Torah portion in Yiddish and his mother-in-law, and he really cared for men and women and everyone. And his love for everything that God made, and his father had taught him to care for everyone and not even to hurt plants, because plants too can feel pain. That's how he acted. But where did this come from? So this is actually everything I shared tonight so far. I know it's a long. It's all introduction to the story I want to share with you now, which is how Yitzchak Shaul had this transformation as a child that brought him to be such a kind person to everyone, even to plants and animals. When he was a little child, he wasn't like this way at all. He would throw stones at birds. He would chase cows and goats and cats. He would tear up plants and tear up grass. And his father, Nissen, had this rooster that would wake him up every morning. And his father loved the rooster because the rooster would crow very loudly, and it would wake him up to begin his day. And he loved it. He would feed it and take care of the rooster. And this boy, Yitzchak Shaul, the more the rooster crowed, the more angry he was, and he would chase the rooster around. When his father would leave, he would torment this rooster. And the rooster gave birth to a bunch of chicks. He threw little stones at the chicks, and little Tyrant was really like he would act horribly. He would take flies and put flies in the web of a spider and watch them writher. That's what he would enjoy doing. If you could get a dog to chase a cat, that was his greatest pleasure. So one day, his father sees what he's doing, and he didn't know. His father suddenly appears behind him, and his father says to him, "This is how you spend your time? I could never imagine a child of mine acting in such a cruel way." So Yitzchak Shaul thought his father's for sure going to hit him. You saw how his father was so upset, but that really wasn't the way of Rabbi Nissen. Rabbi Nissen never ever hit a child. He was a teacher, and sometimes children would misbehave, but he never, unlike all the other school teachers, he would never ever use his cat of nine tails, his strap. He had a strap on the wall. He never ever used it. But he took his son and he sat him down. He asked his son to bring him the Gemara of Masechta Shabbos. He brings him Masechta Shabbos, and he opens up to page 125. On page 125, the Talmud talks about the law of lowering a basket of chickens, a basket of young chicks, and how on Shabbos you're allowed to lower the basket because the young chicks aren't able to jump from the basket to the floor, and therefore you have to lower it in a way so that they'll be able to go out. So his father says to him, look at this. This is the Torah goes out of its way to take care of these chicks, and it changes the halacha for the sake of their protection, so they shouldn't be frightened or get hurt by jumping from a higher distance. Therefore, you're allowed to lower the basket all the way so that they shouldn't get hurt. Then he takes out a Gemara Brachos, the page Mem. There the Gemara quotes the verse which we cite in Shema, and I will give grass to you in your season, and you will eat and be satisfied. First it says, I will give grass to your animal in the field. Then it says, you will eat and be satisfied. The Gemara says, first, you have to feed your animals before you feed yourself. Because the Torah says, feed your animals, then it says, feed yourself. So, after he teaches this to his son, he says to his son, it's not my nature to ever hit anybody. I never hit you before. But I want you to feel real pain so that you'll know how these animals feel. And he told his son to lie down. And he repeated again, he said, I just want you to know what I'm going to do now has nothing to do with anything else. It's just, I want you to understand what pain is like, so you'll never inflict pain on anybody. And then he patched him. And then his father, without a backward glance, he walked out of the room. He went into his own room. Yitzchak Shaul could hear that his father was crying. He was crying because of he was crying because of what he had done. And Yitzchak Shaul said that the tears of his father hurt him a lot more than the patch that he got. And for 3 days, he's walking around full of regret of what he had done to these birds and animals. And at the end of 3 days, he goes over to his father and he kisses his hand. He says, Father, please forgive me. And his father said, listen, I'm responsible for your actions. Whatever you do wrong is my responsibility until the age of bar mitzvah. However, he said, that's not such a big deal. That doesn't matter so much. But imagine growing up and being someone who has no sensitivity. That's what his father said to him, and that really changed Yitzchak Shaul to the extent that he was haunted by his previous behavior, so much so that he would have images of what he used to do, and that just brought him such shame and regret, and that was what produced his amazing character as an adult. That's the story I wanted to share. Before we break, I'll tell you one more story, actually in sync with the month of Av. It says during the month of Av, and especially, a parent should not hit a child. Of course, you never hit a child at all, ever. But it says, especially in the month of Av. On that note, Rabbi Shmuel Lu, he was once in an audience with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him, he asked the Rebbe, what should he do? His children misbehave. What should he do about his children? They're misbehaving. And he says he hits his kids sometimes. The Rebbe told him, one of the things you could think about to hold yourself back from hitting your children is the following. Imagine, the Rebbe said, if someone else, they will be someone else's children, you never think of hitting them. So these children, the Rebbe said, aren't your children, they're really God's children. That's what Rebbe told Rabbi Shmuel Lu. So a friend of mine, he took what Rebbe said to Rabbi Shmuel Lu to heart, and he never again raised his hand on his children at all. He wasn't crazy, but he wasn't abusive, but he did hit them. He thought that's part of education. After he heard this, he stopped. Then he said 2 years later, he felt, well, his child, not because he had lost it, but the child needs a spanking. Maybe he thought he was like I'm listening in the story. And that day he gave his child a patch. That day he saw a letter of the Rebbe about the month of Av. So the previous Rebbe says about the month of Av the following. Actually, the previous Rebbe says this about the Tanya, and the Rebbe connects this to the month of Av. It says in Tanya, in Igeres HaKodesh, at the end of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that I think it's in letter 22, the Alter Rebbe says that a Jew should never try to escape something that God sends him. Whatever God gives us is good, and a Jew should never try to should accept what God gives him with love. And the Alter Rebbe gives an example. The Alter Rebbe says, imagine that there's a father who is wise, and he's a tzaddik, and he's a chassid. And this father who is wise and a tzaddik and a chassid Imagine if he hits his son. The son shouldn't run away because his father is doing this for his own benefit. That's what the previous Rebbe says. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. So the previous Rebbe notes that in the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe changes some words. The Alter Rebbe starts a sentence with, imagine if there's a father who's a tzaddik and a wise man and a chassid, and this father who is wise and a tzaddik hits his son. So he takes out the word chassid when he finishes the sentence. So the previous Rebbe said the reason he takes that out is because a chassid never hits. So that's what my friend saw in this letter on the day, the first time in 2 years that he had ever raised a hand on his child. Can you imagine what kind of effect it had on him? Anyways, so that letter that I just quoted is a letter about the month of Av. The Eibishter is a father, and the Eibishter is a chassid. We say in Davnu chassid chamaisa, and therefore the month of Av, it's called Menachem Av. That whatever has happened already in the month of Av, but the month of Av is a time when the Eibishter transforms all the negative and all the pain of our people to bracha and simcha and geula, and because a father, a chassid, doesn't hit his child. A father is menachem, on the contrary, brings comfort to his child, as he will. Hashem will immediately, the coming Mashiach, when we see this happen tonight, go to Yerushalayim HaKodesh, Mashiach Tzidkeinu, Tchias HaMesim, and rebuild the third Beis HaMikdash. And that's what I wanted to share. Questions, comments?
Amen. Thank you.
All right. Shkef Raberel, good Vach Raberel, good Vach Yehuda, good Vach David, good Charlie.